Hello and welcome back to our database question game. This is going to be a second and hopefully a final video for this super short video series. And in this video, we'll just finish up what we started and add a couple of more functionality so the game is a little bit more playable. So to start off, I want to summarize what we did in the previous video. We just simply created a new frame that has a question, has a status label here, and it has a answer input, of course, and after each input, when we press enter, this answer input is being processed, and if it's correct, if it's the same as the correct answer, it tells me, well, you answered it correctly. If not, the status label updates accordingly. And at the same time, we have this tries label. These tries, both of these numbers are different variables. The total tries is being updated through the database. It's checked from the database how many tries are there total. It's happening once per second in a parallel thread, and your tries are being incremented by one each time I press enter with some sort of normal answer. If it's empty, for example, and I press enter, nothing's happening because it's not an actual answer. If I write something, it's going to be added as one more. And here we can see that how it happens that this is being taken from the database, and even though I'm doing it in a separate instance of this program, this knows how many tries are there total because it's checking the database. And if I'm doing the same thing here, we accordingly update the both of these labels. And so if I answer correctly, there's, yep, you're right, congrats, everything's fine. But we only detect it here in one of these frames because the correct answer is detected after we have inputted it. After we press enter, we check it with the correct answer, and then we say, okay, fine. But this other frame doesn't know that the actual correct answer has been given. And if we go to the database, which I've started already, we go to answer tries, we see that we have all these incorrect tries. And then this one is correct one, and it is the winner because it's the first correct answer for this question with ID number 1. But the problem is, if we go to the question table, we can see that the first question isn't answered. It should be 1, and I should have me as a winner name. And so if I would have this, then maybe if somebody comes to the game later on, we'd have the next question. Because if we again go back and return back to as we had before, even if somebody comes after somebody else has answered it correctly, we would still start with the first question. And that's a problem we have to fix. And one more thing, even if somebody answers correctly, maybe after somebody else, it doesn't matter, we still don't go to the next question. We want to move on and automatically move to the next question. And one more thing I wanted to add, I mentioned previously in the first video, is we want to have a simple username input. And if username, let's say, is admin, let's just have a simple string comparison. If it's admin, we will create something like admin panel, where the admin can add new questions, add the correct answers to the database, and just keep populating the game and keep moving on. Yes, one more thing, as I mentioned, we want to move to the next question automatically if we have answered correctly, like refresh the frame for the next question. And a little bit different is going to be checking if somebody else has answered correctly, because there we will not have this answer input. So we would just need to be able, without doing anything to the frame, it should be able to detect itself if there has been a correct answer. And that will be done the same way as we did with these total tries. We will have a parallel thread that updates once per second maybe, and always checks the database. Did somebody answer correctly? Did somebody answer correctly? And once it gets the yes back, then we move on to the next question, because we don't want to be super late, because the person who answered correctly is already to the next question. And in the end, maybe we can talk a little bit about some future ideas, what we could add, because this project that I'm creating right now is not going to be super polished and ready for playing. Maybe you could sort of play it, but it will not be super ready for playing, because it's going to be just an accumulation of ideas, of techniques, of functionalities that you can use to maybe finish this project or start a new one, sort of similar to this one or maybe completely different. So this project's idea is not to make it super awesome game, but just to show you what you can do. So without further ado, we can go here and check everything, delete the database. Well, not the whole database. I added a couple more questions so it would be easier to test. Answer tries is empty, and we can move on. So the first thing we want to do is, we want to sort of move down. First, we initialized the database, ask the database for the first active question, which means the oldest question that doesn't have a correct answer or that doesn't have a winner. And then we set up the update tries thread, and then we create a game frame. So before we do all that, maybe even after this, what we want to do is create a JOption pane and call the method calling show input dialog and have a message, hey, how shall I call you, stranger? And what this does is, well, I can actually show you what it does. It opens up a default question dialog that has this message, the input field, very simple, and OK and cancel buttons. And when we input something and we press OK and we move on, that doesn't matter. But when we press OK, this input is going to be the result of this method call. So what we want to do is say string username is going to be what the person input in this dialog. And one more check, if username is null, then I'll simply exit the program. Nothing super fancy. You can maybe add some notification. Hey, you didn't answer, you didn't input your name. You can't move on without it. So you can either enter your name again, or just simply exit the program, or you can do whatever. Because this null is going to be if we are pressing cancel, for example, as we can see, the program ended. Or if we press, I think this cross at the top, yes, it's also a null because we didn't input anything. And if we have the username, we can just output in here. You can say something. And here we can see that we are outputting that username, so we have it in this variable. So that's great. So what we want to do now is say, okay, if this username equals string admin, we want to start new admin panel, which is going to be, we'll create a JFrame from that. And if it's not admin, we will just do what we did before with just opening the game. So if it's admin, it has an admin panel. If not, we'll just open a question. This is super simple and very trivial, just to show you that we can give different functionalities for different players. But one thing about this function, what I want to add, in this particular situation, this notation is correct and it's sort of fine. But when you use the equals method with variables and on the other side you have a strict string just hard-coded in the code, just something that has value, you should always do it the other way. If admin equals username, because if in here the username would be null without its actual value, this would throw a null pointer exception. Because if it's this is null, you cannot have the equals method to the null, right? Because it's not string, it's nothing. It doesn't have a pointer to any actual object, any element in the program. So this, if the first thing that you are calling the equals method to is null, you would get a null pointer exception. But if you are calling it the other way, this is a string. This will always be this will always have a value, because you are hard coding it. And this can be null. You can check if something equals null. That's no problem. So in this particular situation, if you have a username as null, it would just give you answer as false, right? It's not equal, everything's fine, you can move on. But in here you get an exception and your program will most likely stop. But in this case I can do it in the kind of incorrect way, because previously we are checking if the username is null, so the null cannot get to this point. But if we didn't have the check, this would be problematic, because we could get a null pointer exception. And we can actually try it. If I press cancel, here we go, we get a null pointer exception because username is null, because user didn't input anything, it doesn't have a value, and when we check nothing to the admin, it says, well, what kind of equals method do you want? I don't know what to ask. What kind of class is this something that doesn't have a value, right? So try to remember that. If you're using some kind of method for string or anything else, make sure that you are checking if it has a null, possible null value or not. And with equals, you can always swap them around and be safe from that problem. Okay, so moving on, we can create a new admin panel. And this is going to be a new class that I already started a little bit. So it's just a class that extends JFrame. It has the same integer values with width and height, the same container. I said different title. Everything else is the same as in JFrame at the beginning. It doesn't have an init method because we didn't create anything yet. So if we start it, and if we input admin, we can say that we can see that we have an admin panel. There's nothing in it because we didn't add anything. And if we add something else, then we open up a game just as we want to. So we can go on to this admin panel and try to initialize it, try to create something in it. So what I would want to have here is, okay, let's create a method first. So we can be private, void init, private because we are not calling it from outside of this class, void because it doesn't return anything, of course. First thing first, set layout null, because we want to set these coordinates specifically as I want to. We don't need any specific layouts. One thing, I will jump back to the game frame and steal the text font and go back there. And one more thing, I will steal a create new label method, just so I don't need to rewrite it in here. So first thing, we can say we want to create new label. And say, okay, question. We'll use a text font, color white, and maybe 60 from the top and from the left. It can be 500 wide, although it doesn't matter, and 30 high. We don't need to assign this value to anything because we don't need to work with this label. It will always stay as a question. But what we want is have the inputs for the question and for the answer. And for that, we want them to be a class variables so we can get to them from different methods. So private JText field, question input, and answer input as well. Import the JText field class. Okay, and for the JText field, we can actually also create another class, another method. It can be private JText field, create text field. This is sort of going to be the same method. But one thing I already noticed, these are not good naming conventions. Okay, if we create an element, we use a create at the beginning, so we can see that we create something and maybe we return it back. But in here, if I say text field, then here I should say create label. Or if I say create new label, then I should say create new text field in here. As the word new is obsolete, it's useless in here. We actually shouldn't use it. And we want to go back to the game frame and go to here and refactor, rename it, and call this create label. And as we did it with Eclipse functionality, it updated all the references where this method is called. So this is sort of a little bit better naming convention, and all these little details make your code better every day. So one thing I would add is columns, how many columns we have, or it's actually not columns, it's rows. Again, the same x, y, width, and height. These could also be set as longer variable names, but as these are the default values that are always x is the x-axis value, and y is y-axis value, and w is width, and h is height, and as we're using them all in one method, it's super obvious what we are using them for. So in this case, it's not super bad to use those short variable names. So JText field, especially when we are using the same idea for all the methods in all the classes, all the places. So it's a new JText field, and rows are the rows, how many we passed, and the text field set bounds, all these variables that we passed, x, y, w, and h. And this is also a good thing. You should pass these values at the same way as you are using them in the method. So this is the first one, you're taking it in as a first one. These you are using one after the other, so the x is first, h is last, so that's how you are calling them in the parameter list. If you're mixing them up, then you'll just get super confused, or maybe if not you, maybe somebody else that continues your code a little bit later, maybe after half a year. Then if it's passed as an y and this is an x, maybe you keep track of it right now, but I can make sure of it that sooner or later somebody is going to make a mistake just because these values are swapped. Okay, what we have to do, we have to add this one to the container, add, and text field. So we have it, and we can return it back if we want to use it somewhere else when we call this method. And in here we can say this class's question input is going to be this create text field. And rows is going to be 1, obviously. We can have it 60 from the left. Let's have it 100 from the top. 400 wide and 60 high. We can copy almost the same thing and have this one as the answer label. We will also have the same, maybe not answer, maybe correct answer. Color white as well. This we have a little bit more from the top. Yeah, we can leave it at 500 and at 30. And here the same size. This would have a 200, 460. Okay, and then what we need is the buttons that we want to, submit this question and start a new one, and another button for, I'm finished, I want to close this one. So we'll create a new buttons, J button. Well, let's call it submit. And have the same text for it, and this container, and again add the submit button. One more thing we missed, we need to set some kind of bounds to it. Set bounds, and we can have it more from the left, more from the top, 100 wide and 30 high. Okay, let's create a last one. This is going to be the button what we can use to actually finish working with this. Set bounds. We can have it again 360, 280, and a little bit more to the right. Actually, this is too far. This is 230. So what we have is, what we want to have is these text inputs are 400 wide and 60 from the left side. So these inputs are ending up at 460 pixels from the left side. So with these buttons, I'm starting this one 360 from the left, and it's 100 wide. So it also ends right at the same pixel as these inputs end. So they are sort of aligned a little bit better. And this one is the same width, just a little bit 30 pixels back. If it starts at 230, it's 100 wide. It will end at 330, and this starts at 360, so it has 30 pixels in between. And if we run it and see, we have admin. Oh, we didn't add the finish button. So this container and finish button. Let's try it again. So here we can see that it's sort of, it looks okay. We have a question, everything's aligned to this side, and the buttons are aligned to the right side and to the vertical axis as well. So basically we don't need anything else. We could actually make it a little bit smaller, but it doesn't matter for now. It's again this tidying up things to do at the end. We can actually change the design to maybe something better, but that's not the idea. So what we want to do now is when we input something, nothing, and we submit it, what we need to have, you probably know already, we need to have some sort of listener. We need to set an action to this button so we can tell it what to do. One thing we could do is create a new class, or do it in here and say implements mouse listener, and add these unimplemented methods, and use the mouse pressed this method, and then set this class as a listener to each of these buttons. But then we have, as we can see, we have 3, 4, 5 methods. And if we have 4, if we use actually one of them, then 4 of these methods are just not used. So basically we're sort of adding something to the code that we actually don't need. If we are using only one, the default method, right, the clicking the button, then we can actually do something else. Redo it again. And what we can do here is, after we add it, we can say submit, add action listener. And we can create new action listener in here and set up this class right away. And what this class needs is public void action performed. It's given the event just like the mouse listener and key listeners. And here we can say something like, something, submit question and move to the next. We import all the classes, then everything's fine. If we need just this little simple functionality, we don't need to import any other classes. We don't need to implement the key listener and so on. The action listener is pretty simple and very useful for this situation. And we can set a different action listener for each one of them, and we don't need to create new classes for that. New other class the Java files. So the finish will have its own. And here we can say, let's call a finish method and create it right away. Not public, private void finish. And what we can do here is say this, set visible false. Or maybe we can also say exit. We're going to just close the program and forget about everything. And in here we could go to, let's say save question. And we'd have that method as well. And here we can just have a printout so we can see that everything's working. So we have an admin again. If we submit, we can see that it's actually working, the submit button. And if we press finish, we exit the program for good. So what do we have to do in the save question method? For the one thing, we would need to get the inputs, then check if they are okay, and then send that to the database as new question. Somebody inputs it, we are sorting it out if everything's fine. If it's good, then we are sending it to the database. If not, we're just not going to do anything. So what we can do now, as we have these, where is it? The question input, and this is the same, this should be answer input. We have both of these inputs as class variables. We can get to them from this method, and we can say string question is this class's question input get text, and string answer just the same way. And simply if question length is 0 or answer length is 0, then we're just going to return and do nothing. But if it's not 0, we'll say question input set text to empty, and answer input set text to empty as well. So we are preparing for a new input. And we can create actually a new question object. As we need to pass these values to the database, we can just simply create a new question and pass. What do we need for the question? We need to pass the ID, which is really weird. It should be larger ID. We can pass the ID, text, and answer. And this is something you can also think about. If you need to add a lot of them, maybe you are adding a functionality to go back to the previous question and maybe edit or delete it, then you would need to generate new ID or get that back from the database. and store all these questions maybe in an array list in here and just populate it more and more. But in here, as we just need to pass these 2 string values to the database and have a method that saves it as a new question, we actually could not do all this and just say from the start class we get to the database and add question. If we go back to the database, where do we have add question? We have the add question here that we created already. I'm just checking. Yeah, okay. So what this does is it gets from the question object these 2 values. So as we could create, as we would like to pass only 2 strings, we would want to edit this method. I think I added it at the beginning just for fun, just to be able to do something. But in here, I want to see if this method is used in this project. And Eclipse has a nice functionality. We can go to References and Project and see that it's a 1 potential match in admin panel. We go back to here, it's this one. So if we remove what we just created, then we can see, go back to this, the same thing and do it one more time. And we can see that there are 0 references in our project. So we are safe to edit this function to our liking. For example, if we do it with this one, we go to the same, and we can see all the places where it has been called. It's only, all of these methods are called only once. I think we can maybe go to the JFrame and call this create label. And references, project, and it shows 3 matches and it actually lights them up. So this is a very useful tool if you have multiple files, or if you're refactoring your code, you don't want to use Control F all the time. You can just find all the references in the project and see if you can delete this method, or if you can, if you can update it or whatever. So here, as we saw that nothing is using it, we can actually pass string question and string answer, and in here pass the question and answer as 2 parameters. So we set the query with the 2 possible values, create prepared statement, and set 2 strings. The first one is question and second is answered. So it, as I said before, it escapes all the possible problems, all the possible problematic strings and everything, and creates a safe query and executes it into the database. So we can save that, go back to admin panel, and here we can say add question with the question string and the answer string. And yeah, that's it. We can remove this one and see what's up. We can open it up, say admin, have the question, did I do it properly? We say nope and submit. We can see that these inputs are cleared. We go back to the database, check the questions, and we can see that we have a new question here and the answer as well. And these values we did not need to set specifically, because if we go back to the where is it, the table question, the basics, we can see that these 2 columns have default values, and if we don't set it specifically to something, it takes just those default values that we actually need. The 0, it's not answered, and null, it doesn't have a winner name. So basically this is fine, this is created, and if we can test it again, the answer isn't given, so it's not accepted. If we go back to the data, we can see, I'm refreshing, you can see that nothing is added. If we add only the answer, then the same thing happens. Nothing is changing in here. So we need both of them. Maybe you could add a status label at the top when it's not when both of these elements are not inputted. You can maybe give a red notification, hey, input both of them, or it's not a valid question, or something like that. But I think this is what we need to create with the admin panel. So we can move back to the game frame, go back here, so it's not admin. We input something else, we go to this, go to the game frame. One thing I would like to do is take this one and remove it and not pass it like that to the game frame. I would like to pass only the username. And we can go to the game frame and remove these three, and which one's question? What was it? The question, correct answer, and question ID. Correct answer and question ID, this one, okay. So we'll remove that one. And what we can do is say string username, and we add a private string user, and we can call it user, username, whatever. And in here we say this class's username is the one that was passed. And one more thing, we are going to create a question object. That's an active question in active question. And we're going to update it each time when we get to the new question. So one thing we need to do in here, I don't know if okay, what's wrong in here? If we save it, we have some sort of problems. Okay, there's no question we can pass in here, so we're gonna pass the empty string for now. And what do we have here is something. Well, let's say false for now, just so we have it running. Okay, whatever. Say everything's fine. What is not fine? Oh, we don't have the question ID. Yeah, because we're going to update it a little bit later. So we can actually undo this one and stay with a couple of errors for now. So what we need to do is we have this init function that runs when we start our frame. But we need to create another method called, well, setup or create question or whatever, that is going to set up the things that are specific to one question. We need to have this function for the reason that when we are finished with one question, we can get a new question and set the frame up for the new question. So we can edit this, the question label, change these try values and so on, everything that I talked before about. So we need to differentiate both of those things. So we can create a class, no, again, a method setup, or maybe you can call it setup question, because setup doesn't answer a question. What is the setup? What is the difference between init and setup? So this is going to be setup question. And what we're going to do is say this class's active question is going to be from the database taken get active question. So each time we need to set up a new one, we ask for the new active question, and maybe say if active question again is null, then we simply exit the program. We can actually do it a little bit wider and maybe say to do detect the winner, because if we run out of questions, we have to detect who won. I'm probably not going to do that in this video, but you can add it for your game. And then this class's question label, as on the default we have it empty. We need to add the question to the question label because it contains nothing for now. So question label, when we know which is the active question, we can say set text to it and say this class is active questions, what is it, text value, the actual question of it. And then we can say this class is total tries, or no, total tries we are not resetting, we are saying active tries. Do we have it? Oh, player tries, okay. Player tries is back to 0 because it's a new question. And this is actually what is a problem with naming something differently in the program visually and naming it in the code. Because if you're testing, if you're working visually with the program, you see that your tries, if you're calling it your tries or player tries or something, or active tries, you should rename it to the variables as well. Because if it goes naturally, if you call it active tries, then it should be active tries as a variable as well. So then the next programmer or you after half a year would understand it easier what this actually means. But as your tries sounds a bit stupid and active tries is actually, again, something stupid, I think player tries is still something to go. I just need to rewire my brain to call it player tries, which is actually a better name. But if you are mixing it up, you should, or messing it up, you should actually think about renaming these variables. And status label, we can set text to default status label text. And I want to do it, I want to take this one and say private static status label text, or what is it, default. Just so we have it and we do not need to call it multiple times. What's wrong? Oh yeah, private static string. Obviously, there we go. So we use this label in multiple places, so it's better to use a variable. So here we reset it. What was it? Try to answer the question quickly each time when we move to the next question. And then one more thing, we need to repaint. So basically we are refreshing the window for the next question. And one more thing, we are not going to call the update tries in here. We're going to call it in the init method before the update tries in here. Update tries, just so it happens at the same place and it doesn't belong in the main method. So we can go back to this problematic place and see that we had a correct answer variable in a specific variable, but now we have the active question, and this question object has its own property, the correct answer, right? So we can use that. And the same with ID. We have the active question now, and we can take the ID from that object, and now we can use both of them. And now in here, when the key is pressed, when we press the answer, we added to both of these tries, whatever, move on, check if it's correct, add the answer try to the database, and if it's correct, we want to go to setup question, meaning it's going to get the new question from the database and repaint the frame for the next one. So sort of the only problem we are left with is when we are adding this answer try, we need to set hold on, why is there a problem here? Oh, there's a problem with that, and we have the game frame, and for the game frame again we have the active question, and of that question we get the ID to pass to the database. And going back, when we're adding this answer try in here, do we have some? No, we don't. If we are adding this answer try and we detect that it is a winner, we should keep checking it all the time so we can detect, okay, if we have a winner, let's update the database. We could actually do all of this in one statement when we are inserting the answer try, checking if the question has been already answered, update that, and then update this question as well, everything in one SQL query. But as it's pretty complex to do that, and it's not the point of this video, we're actually going to do that in Java. So we're going to this database class, and when we are, when we are adding the answer try, after that we are going to say check winner. So every time we are asking, if we are inputting the answer try, there's a new possibility that there's a new winner. So we're going to do that and create a new method. Finally, I called it correctly. Check winner. And this is going to be sort of the same basics. Okay, and in here, we're going to have a string player. It's going to be a question from a question ID that we're going to pass in here. And so we need to pass the question ID from the previous method. So we're actually checking winner for this particular question. Why is there a problem? Because here's a problem. Oh yeah, of course, because it's not string, it's an integer. Oh, of course. So in here we are actually also going to call the get question winner method. So we're going to just get, do we have a winner or not? Because we're going to do something with that as well a little bit later. So we're going to get, as we're getting a string back, get question winner, and we're given question ID. In here we need to get winner for this question. And sort of the idea is this: we are adding the answer try, and then we're checking, okay, is there a winner for this question? If there is, we should add this winner to this place for this question and set his answer to true. But if it's not, well, then we don't care. Then there isn't a winner, and we can keep moving on, like answering the question multiple more times. So with this one, again, try catch. And what do we need to have here? We need to detect if there has been a correct answer to this question. And that is what we need to get. We can get a as we need to get not only is the question answered, but also who answered this question. Then we say select. How is it called in the answer try? It's a player column. So select player from table answer try, where question ID equals this question ID that we passed, and is correct is true, or in database's case is 1. We're just going to order by answer time ascendingly, and we'll limit to 1, which means we are going to take the one oldest correct answer for this question, and we don't need any other values from this row. We just need the player who answered correctly. And we're just going to say this result set equals statement execute query, and with our query. And here we work with the while loop with this result set next, just as we did before. And as soon as we get this result set get string player column, we need to return out from this method, right? We need to get back to the call. So we can just simply say return this string. So as soon as we get the first one, we're returning out, because there will never be more than one, because we are limited to 1. But there is a possibility that we don't have it at all, and this loop doesn't work, or this statement doesn't execute. There's an error or something. So if that happens, after everything, we're just going to return false. Not false, we return null, meaning we didn't find a winner. Sorry, we don't have a player. And back in here, when we check the winner, we can say if player equals null, we just return, we end this method. But if it's not null, we are going to set a question winner with the question ID and the player. So we're going to do the second part. We sort of divided into 2 parts. We went to the answer tries and gathered the one guy who answered correctly, and then we jump back to the table question and spit it out into this table. Nope, we don't need Chrome. So set question winner is going to be void. It takes question ID and string player name or player whatever. Again, try catch. And here we're going to have a query that is going to update the existing row. So what we need to do is, number 1, we need to update. What do we need to update? The table question, obviously. But what we need to do is, what we need to set. If we go back to the database, we can see that we need to set a winner name to that player ID, and is answered to 1 to the row that has the ID that we just passed. So we're going to set winner name to something, and is answered to 1 always, and where ID equals something else. This prepared statement equals this connection prepare statement with this query. And the difference between this concatenation and this, in here we just use the question ID that we know it comes from our database, so we know it's just an integer, it cannot be anything else. But as we are working with string player, it's a very tricky thing, as we are allowing the player to input it as we want. it obviously cannot come from our database table as a vulnerable text. But still, if the user inputs his username as, again, as I showed, semicolon for ending the previous one, and then delete maybe all from table users, and then finishing this and setting a comment for the next one. If he sets his username to this, then we could probably use our table users table if we are not careful with what we give the user to input. So as in here we work with the string that we completely allow the user to use to set up, then we have to be careful. Again, this prepared statement, set string. The number 1 is winner name, so it's player string. And this prepared statement, set integer, is the next one. The second is question ID. And this prepared statement, how was it? Execute update. Execute update. Okay, and we have it set. So this is for you to always remember. You can never trust the user to input something, a good input, to have a good input. And even if you are checking maybe in the input form that you don't allow anything else but the letters maybe, or letters and numbers, it can still be changed later on. Maybe in another iteration you forgot to add this check, and then a user can input something that's vulnerable to your program, and then you can lose all your database. So always be aware of SQL injections, because this is the oldest and simplest way how to attack any system for retrieving or deleting some kind of data. But I think for this we are set. Because we, again, going back, if it's admin, it's admin. It does its own thing. If we are playing the game, we are passing the username. When we're doing that, we are saving the username. We can see that it's not used here, so we need to do something with that. We set up everything, all the basics, and we initialize the frame. What we would need to do in the initialize part, or maybe not in the initialize, but after that, we would set up a question. We'll finally call this method. So we call the first question, then we set everything visible true. Everything's fine in it. We created all these elements, created default text, everything is there. We are checking the database for total tries. We add the inputs, we add the listener, everything's fine. When somebody answers correctly, everything is in here. And in here we were actually, we go back to the database, in here we can see that we are passing the player name. And here I set, in previous video, I set a default to me. But now we can say this class is username, the user that the actual player inputted in the beginning. So we can do that. And that was reminded to me by the warning that the username variable wasn't used. So this is great. Congrats. And then we set up the next question. And if it's not true, we are updating the label and we don't need to do anything else. And we need to do one more thing that I mentioned at the beginning. We need to create a new method. It's going to be update question. Yeah, update question. We could call it that. Maybe we could figure out some better name a little bit later. what we need to do is keep checking the same as we did with the tries. Keep checking if any question has a winner and we need to move on. Again, as I said, we are creating a new thread. Equals new thread. And we're going to set it up right here. Public void run method. The only thing we need. We're going to have a do while that's going to run forever. And here we're going to call the same start classes pause method with how many? Yeah, let's do 1 second and say string winner equals start methods. Through the start class, we get to this database as it is static string to that, and we get question winner. And here we sort of have a problem. To get a winner, we need to pass the question ID. We have the question ID in this JFrame class, right? As we had the active question, and from that we could get the ID. But as we are in a new object, in a new class, if we are saying this something, it now is assigned to this thread object, not to the outside JFrame object. So there we have sort of a problem. But as we have the start class and we have the JFrame object in there, and the start class is static, and it's static because we have the main method in it. So we can go from start class, JFrame object, its active question, and we get the ID. So we sort of from here we jump to the start class that we can always get its static value JFrame, which is this outside object that we cannot access any different way, and get the active question from that. One more option would be to say JFrame whatever outer is this. We set it and then we can use it in here. Wait, outer class active question ID. This would be one more way. So we are giving this reference to this actual class to another variable, which doesn't change in this method, so we can keep using that one. But again, if we are in other element, then this is assigned to something else. And if you're going to use a JavaScript and do all those loops and maps and for each loops and everything, you will realize that this in every other loop cannot be assigned to the same thing that you think, and it's a lot of mess. It's a lot of possible mess. So what's the problem in here? Yeah, it's not closed, and we need a thread start. Because we call it, we set up the thread, and we need to start it. And one more thing, if the winner to this question that we are trying to answer, if it's not null, if this question has a winner, then what we need to do is start class, JFrame, set up question. We need to move to the next question, right? Because if this one already has an answer, we don't need to stay here. We need to move to the next question. So let's see how we did, and let's hope that there are not too many errors. So we can start this one. Okay, let's be a player one. Okay, let's not. Jim. And have another one, and this will be Bob. Oh, we didn't use, okay, I want to close it. I forgot about one thing I wanted to add. Where is the setup question? When we're setting up question, I wanted to say, hey, this username. And then plus, and then we didn't have the question marks at the end, so we can add the question mark. Or to be sure we don't add multiple question marks, we can say string question equals this, replace question mark with an empty string, and then add that one to the end. It's sort of a hack, a pseudo replace option, but well, we could actually go replace all and use a regex, but whatever, we can do just like that. But as we don't have anything, any questions with the question marks, I'm going to leave it there. That was just the optional value. So again, Jim. Oh, we lost a space. Let's fix at least a sentence. So Jimmy and Johnny. So now, at least in the frame, we can see that we have two different players. Okay, we are answering, doing something. Everything is added. We check the database. All these answers have been incorrect. So now I am writing the who, and you should try to keep an eye on both of these frames, and maybe you can pause the video and go back if you missed it. So if I answered correctly, I update the total tries to 10, and now I have a new question. And in here we also have a new question, but this didn't change. So we changed the question, I think. No, we didn't. Did we? I don't know. Let's see again. If we answer correctly. Yeah, we didn't change the questions. We set the total tries to 0. The your tries to 0, and total tries are still the same. And we didn't change the question as well. So we need to debug a little bit. First of all, we need to figure out, okay, this one was correct. The first player who set it to correct, who answered correctly, is correct and is winner. And next one is also correct, it's fine, but he's not winner because he's not the first one. And if we go to the question class, refresh it, is answered is not true. So we didn't update the question at the end. So that's something we have to fix. So how do we know where to start? So when did it happen? We set it correct. We got the yep, you are right, and congrats. So that's one thing that was correct. Oh, I know one more thing we didn't do. We created this method that works in a parallel thread, but we didn't actually call it. So let's have it, let's have it somewhere here. So we set up question and we keep updating the question if it's not there yet. And set up question. One more thing, this player tries is 0, and this total tries is also 0, because we just started, there should be 0. I think it should be true, yeah, but something didn't update the database. Something I think was wrong. So from the add answer try, we passed the ID. Let's see what we're doing in here. So we're checking the winner with the question ID. We're passing the question ID in here to get the question winner. Do we have a question winner? Select player from table answer try where question ID is that. And is correct is 1. So the first is correct. We get the player, and what we could do is say sysout winner is, and then print out the player that we have, and then set question winner. Where is it? Set question winner in here. Update table question. Set winner name is answer, and is that is answered is 1, where question ID is the one that we passed. Number 1 is player, number 2 is question ID. Player and question ID. Interesting. So we can maybe we have multiple of those. No, probably don't. Okay, interesting. Let's print out the question ID and player, and let's see what's happening. What's happening? Jim, Joe. Now we have something. Oh, winner is Jimmy. So we already had a winner for this question. So obviously it found a winner right there. So this sort of works fine, but the problem is that we didn't update the question here. If player is null, we return, but we didn't return. We had to go to set question winner. Oh, 0 and Jimmy. 0 and Jimmy. So question ID is not given. So we have a 0 as a question ID. That means the question ID was 0 in here, and question ID was 0 in here, and question ID was 0 in here. But if we go to the database, oh yeah, we can see that the question ID that we are passing is 0. So that means there's a problem. Add answer try. Again, where do we use it? Refactor, nope, not refactor. References, project. We use it in here. And active questions ID is 0. Why? If we go back to the place where we get active question, we are passing these 3 values. The question, of course, this ID. Because again, if we have 2 of these, if we have the method variable and the class variable, if we have 2 of them, and there is a possibility to not knowing which ID I'm referring to, that's why we need to say, okay, this, which means this class is ID, and if I'm not saying this, I'm talking about the smallest scope I have. So in this case, it's this method's ID, it's this ID. So basically, if it's a new ID, and this is a new ID, then this is this ID, right? The second ID. But if I want to specify the class's ID, that's why it's always better to use this in front of it. And before I had a typo in here, it was an ID, and that's why it didn't have a problem in there, right? Because this ID is this ID, and this is not the same to that, so it's not confusing it to the parameter that was passed. That's a horrible, horrible typo, but we worked with it. We found the problem pretty fast. I hope it's the correct problem. How can we close it? Oh, console, obviously. And close it, and let's start it once again. I would like to remove these ones. Delete selected rows and close, and question is empty. Okay, let's go again. This one has to be correct. Jimmy and Johnny. So there are no answer tries at the beginning. We're saying what, where, who, and who. And now we had it correctly. So this was lagging a little bit because it's checking once per second. We can update that to a smaller number. But in here we have these total tries updated, my tries updated, we have the question updated, and the status label is updated as well. So again, we can move on with this. So we now have these data updated in this one. I'll have some of this in here. Let's have 5 times. So we have 9 tries, 5 of them are mine. We can see that we still have this debugging text that it keeps checking if there's a winner, and there was not. Where is that printout? I can't see. Oh my God, this is one. So what do we have with the game frame? What did we ask? We had the get question winner. Yeah, okay. So again, going a little bit through this one, we keep checking. Yeah, we can set it. Let's try it. I don't know, 300 maybe? And let's update the question. This one as well to 300. So where is it? When we are playing, it's not the correct one. When we are playing, this thread this do while loop keeps running all the time. It pauses for 0.3 seconds, and then it checks for the database if this active question with this ID, if it has a winner, like give me the winner from the database. If it's nothing, it's nothing. But if it's not empty, if we actually have a winner, we call the setup question again. And the setup question works in the way that it asks for the active question. And if the previous question had a winner, as we can see in here, we get a question that doesn't have an answer to it, doesn't have a correct answer. And it changes to 1 only at the situation where we set it when we set the winner, where somebody had the correct answer try. So right now I can say, what is it, Ottawa? We can look at both sides and we update it, and it updated in here right away, and then there after a little bit longer time. Both of these status labels are updated. We have the next question, and what's the capital of Colombia? Bogota. Capital of Sweden, maybe Calm, answer incorrectly, and this one makes Stockholm. We can try to do almost at the same time. Yeah, I was already in the new question. It's nope, try again. If we go to answer tries, so this Johnny Stockholm with the correct answer was to the 4th question, and Jimmy Stockholm was already to the 5th question, so I didn't even manage to answer incorrectly and too late to the previous question. But if I would answer to the previous question, it would still be, this one would be 1, and but the question winner wouldn't change because he's not the first one. And as we can see, it happens in the same second. Do we have the milliseconds? No, we don't. So it happened in the same second, but it still was able to detect which one was first. And yeah, maybe we can add points or something to the end. Maybe I can leave it to you. Yeah, I'll leave it to you as the video is already closing to 1.5 hours. Yeah, so the points is the one thing you can add maybe under this tries label, maybe somewhere else. Maybe you can give 5 points for answering it correctly and 1 point for answering it correctly, and maybe after somebody else has answered it. And you can test it by, again, where is it, to the JFrame, checking if somebody else has answered correctly, maybe after like every 5 seconds, so you have time to input the correct answer in both of those frames. One more thing, you can set up the database globally. If you don't want to create a global accessible database on your local machine, you can maybe use some web services and do it on the web, and maybe have multiple machines that are connecting to one database, and one one of the players, somebody inputs the questions, and you can have, I don't know, 10 players answering, and you can see who wins. It can be a fun game for, I don't know, rainy night to play with friends. If you upgrade it a little bit, have points, and maybe at the end, when I already determined which is the place, it was at the setup question when we don't have another question to add, when like that's it, we ran out. We can actually test it if we can get to it. So Denmark, Copenhagen, Philippines, Manila. Did I do it properly? Nope. Yeah, so it ended. So it got to this point. So it asked for the database, hey, give me the next question, which doesn't have anybody answered it. Nobody answered it. And so, nope, I have nothing for you. So if it's null, then we end it. And here maybe you can like give us the end frame with top 3 or something, top 3 players or something. So this is all up to you. And if we go back to the database, we can see a little bit more tries, and all the questions are answered. And then Johnny answered 3 questions correctly, and Jimmy answered 4 questions. So Jimmy would be the winner. Maybe you could have the admin panel. At the admin panel, you can set another button, reset all the questions to not answered, and then with that you could do update table question. You can just simply call this query update table question, set is answered is 0 and not and winner name is null, and you run it. This is a warning. It doesn't matter. It's not going to happen when you do it in Java. It just the Haiti just says, well, it's dangerous to update everything without a where clause. But we know we want to update everything. Yes, we update, and we see the data refresh. Everything is fresh, so we can restart the game from new. And one more thing, maybe you can add is, well, actually, there's a lot to do. Maybe you can make it wider, and in here you can have a question list and maybe an X at the end, and you can remove the question if you don't want it. Maybe you can move them around one after the other, and reset all the questions to non-answered. Maybe have a leaderboard somewhere. There's so many things to do. You can also have a leaderboard, another database table, and check it from there at the end of the game. Another thing, going even further, you can have a game class and a game database table, and each question has also a game ID. So you can create an admin can create a new game, let's say countries, and then input a lot of these a lot of the questions and answers, and then say finish the game. And that's it. He maybe input the game name is countries and had 10 questions, and it's ready for playing. And then he can come again and create another new games. And then maybe a new player, when he comes in, he has a list of all the games he can choose from. And maybe I want to play countries, maybe somebody else wants to play animals and celebrities and whatever. And he can just come to this game, choose what he wants, and then open up the question and answer board that's actually the game. So there's so many things you can add. You can update the visuals. You can, I don't know, there's so many ideas. You probably have them yourself. If you want to add something else, great. So if not, I hope it was a great resource for new ideas and new functionalities and techniques. Don't forget about the action listener. Where is it? I always lose the code. Oh, it was in admin panel. The action listener, if we don't need a lot of these default functions, we can just call the default action, and from that check something in there, or call the finish, call some specific method. And we can also use this event object. We can get the source, what was pressed, get to when. This is a timestamp in a long variable. Get so many things and so much stuff from this that it's a great resource to use and great stuff to know that you can use, especially with some specific buttons. So yeah, thank you for getting to the end, if you got to the end, and good luck and happy coding.